Hey there, folks. Welcome to The Roundup. We're a Cowboy State Daily podcast that features interesting people from the Cowboy State. And today, I think this is the one that I've tried the hardest to get, which is ridiculous. This is the person that I've really wanted to get on from the beginning, and he finally said yes. We're going to have a conversation with co-founder and executive editor for Cowboy State Daily, Jimmy Orr. First, though, before we get on to our conversation with Jimmy, I want to tell you about another podcast that's really important if you're a business person in Wyoming. You want to get onto the Wyoming Business Alliance's Business from the Basement podcast. They've got all sorts of resources and great interviews and just a great place to go and to listen to. Just put it on in the background while you are planning your next steps with your Wyoming business. So tune into the Business from the Basement podcast put on by the Wyoming Business Alliance. We're very proud to promote them. But now we're going to promote Cowboy State Daily and Jimmy Orr. Jimmy, it's about time we got you on the roundup because you yourself have a fantastic Wyoming success story and you have brought that success back here to Wyoming after being out there. You've been in the White House, you have been at the LA Times, you have worked for multiple government officials and elected officials. Jimmy, I just want to get started by saying thank you for what you have brought to the state with your vision for Cowboy State Daily, because I think we are all better for it. And tell us a little bit about your love for this state that has brought you away from it and brought you back.
Yeah, Wendy, it's really good to be here and give credit where credit is due. I mean, we have a great team of people. We
Yeah.
really do. You and I have been doing this for over 5 years now, which is
Isn't that
crazy.
ridiculous?
I know
Yeah.
it is. It's insane. Um, Back when Cowboy State Daily was a completely different beast. It's nothing like it was when we started this 5 years ago. And then, of course, we wouldn't be where we are today without Wayne Hughes. I mean,
Oh my gosh.
Wayne's the reason that we get to do what we do, and we are very, very grateful to Wayne and what he's done for all of us and allowing us to
And
do what we do. And
absolutely. I want to make sure that we talk about that later and how Wayne stepped into the picture.
yeah, he's the reason that we're doing everything. So we're very grateful for that, and it's important to mention that up front. But yeah, so we've been doing this for 5 years now. I'm from Cheyenne, Wendy. I grew up here in Cheyenne, which is where I am now. Uh, Left for a number of years, and then was fortunate enough to find a way to come back here, and then get involved with Cowboy State Daily and help co-find it.
Go find it. Yes. I tell you, it's so much fun when I do interviews with longtime Wyoming people who have been around forever. And so many of them have stories about you because you all grew up in Wyoming together. But isn't that the great thing about Wyoming is that we have all these connections and we make all these connections, but Wyoming is the place that we want to stay and we want to come back to.
Yeah,
So
well,
tell us about, well, what?
I was going to say what's fun is to watch the different people that you have on the roundup and to see all their connections. And I notice a number of them slam and insult me, which is a lot of fun. But
There must be a reason for this, Jimmy.
there is. You know, my first job out of high school, I worked for two Wyoming legends, absolute legends. One, thankfully, is still around today, but I worked for Larry Berleffi, who was the voice of the Wyoming Cowboys at KFBC. You and I kind of did the same thing, got our start in radio, journalism and radio.
Right.
And right out of high school, Senator Al Simpson's office was hiring an office assistant. And I applied for that job and was able to work for Dee Rodeker and Olivia Haig in the Cheyenne office, and I was working for Larry Berleffi at KFBC and was going to Laramie County Community College where I met Don Day. We were on the student newspaper together. And
No kidding.
oh yeah, so
Okay.
all these great Wyoming connections. Been friends with Don now for 40 years, which is insane. But yeah, was able to work for Al and for Larry, and that's what got me started in kind of a lifelong focus on in journalism and in politics.
Those 2 that have just been the thread for your career all the way through. At what point did you find an opportunity to leave Wyoming to go do more interesting things and create more interesting life experiences and more connections? What took you away from Wyoming?
Well, I think a lot of people don't appreciate Wyoming for what it is, and so the world is always more exciting when you're a kid outside. And I wanted to experience, the big world. And so I graduated from college and went to school outside of St. Louis and applied for a job in Senator Malcolm Wallop's office. I wanted to go back to DC and was got that job and was working in Washington as a deputy director of communications, and uh, did that for a couple years. He decided to retire after 18 years, and so I moved back to Wyoming after a little over 2 years in Washington with Senator Malcolm Wallop. I moved back with Rob Wallace. Rob Wallace, I met. He was the director of the. He was the uh, director of the Senate Energy Committee. Um, and I moved back with him. He was running for Congress, and so
Rob Wallace was running for Congress?
yeah. Rob ran in 1994 against Barbara Cuban, Jim Magagna, Steve Cranfill, and Doug Chamberlain. So all names that we know. And Rob came in second place. Barbara Cuban won in 1994, but that's where I met uh, Paul Ulrich, who's been on your show, and Jonathan Downing, and all these great people, lifelong friends. It was the greatest summer. I mean, it was just hilarious. We had such a great time. Rob came in second, and so uh, and I give Rob, I make fun of Rob forever because 1994, every Republican won. It was a sweep of the Republicans. That's when Newt Gingrich became Speaker of the House, and it was a Republican revolution in 1994. And I always make fun of Rob. Rob was the only Republican to lose, and
Oh my.
uh, and he blames me. I blame him. Regardless, we moved on. I joined Governor Jim Geringer's staff. He was running for governor, and he was running against Kathy Carpin back in 1994. So I joined him for the general election, and he was victorious. And so I worked as press secretary for Governor Jim Geringer for 4 years. Rob was the first chief of staff. And that was a great experience working for the governor. And as a matter of fact, Wendy, Governor Jim Geringer he was employed by NASA, and so was very
Wait a
much
minute, what did he do for NASA?
he was some kind of scientist. He was some kind of rocket scientist or whatever. Very smart guy, really smart guy. So anyway, he was very much into the internet, and the internet was brand new, and so he kind of brought me into that. I became fascinated into it as well. He was one of the first to have a website, and so we built that website together. But he was also the second elected official in the entire world to webcast, to stream. We streamed a press conference back in 1996. He was the only second one, first one in the country, second one in the world. The first was the president of Malaysia or Indonesia or something, but Governor Jim Geringer was number two.
But who
So,
was watching? I wanna know who was watching.
well, that's the whole story. And so we put out a press release saying that the governor was going to do this press conference and we were going to live stream it on his website, right? And so no longer, did you have to have a radio or a TV or whatever. You could see it, you could hear it on your desktop. This is 1996. So we streamed this press conference. Then we went back and looked at the logs. The numbers were not impressive, Wendy. A grand total of 9 people tuned in. 5 of those people were in the governor's office. So Joanne Barron, who was a reporter for the Casper Star, who's now a columnist with Cowboy State Daily, who has covered Wyoming politics since 1970. She's 95, sharp as a tack, wonderful person. She covered this press conference for Governor Geringer, specifically was interested in, well, how many people tuned in? She called me. So I checked the logs, grand total of 9, 5 in the governor's office. So, it's all about spin, right? If you're a press secretary. So
Sure. Yeah.
I said quite a few. And that she didn't press me on it, so that's what was reported in the Casper Star. Governor holds historic webcast. That's what it was called back then, and uh, and the quote was quite a few, and really that was true because we
Oh,
know
sure. Yeah.
we know Joanne and Kerry Drake. Kerry Drake's still around, great guy. We know they tuned in. We know the governor's office tuned in. So really nobody tuned in, but who cared? We could say we were the first in the country to do it.
Which I think is so impressive, and look at us now, Jimmy. Look at
Yeah,
us now. We're
everything
still
is
you're still webcasting. You've made history, and now we're look at us still doing this. So, Governor Jim Geringer's office, you had amazing experiences there, groundbreaking experiences there. What what I'm really interested in how you got to Washington D.C. because I think that that's fantastic. You got back to DC at the end of the '90s, and the world changed.
yeah, and so this accomplishment of live streaming really was able to pay off, Wendy. I went back to Washington. A friend of Rob's is a lobbyist. He's a very successful lobbyist back there, and the funniest guy in the world, Jack Ferguson. And so Rob had suggested, you ought to go into lobbying. And so after 4 years with the governor, I decided I would give that a shot. And Jack was loyal enough to Rob to give me a chance. I was horrible at it. I was horrible at it. Now, some people are really good in the lobbying world. I'm not. It's not my thing. And so I went to work for this boutique lobbying firm, and it was a great experience and great people. But it was I hated it. Good for the
You have
people
to
that
have the
like it,
Yeah, you have to have those experiences to know what you like, what you don't
right?
like, what you're good at. Yes.
And so um, when so during the 2000 campaign, and Dick Cheney was selected as a vice presidential candidate. I was talking to Jack about it, and Jack said, because Jack knew I was a horrible lobbyist, and just probably wanted to offload me onto somewhere else. But he said, "Yeah, you ought to go to work for the, you ought to go to work for the campaign." And so I made some calls, and I was, and you get different people doing different things, and they said, "Well, yeah, sure, you can join us. You can be a volunteer, and you can do advance." So advance work is when you move ahead of the candidate and set things up, right? And so I thought, yeah, I'll do that. Happy to do that. So I joined the campaign, did advance. Another Wyoming person was on it, Dave Pickard. He's a very successful lobbyist because he's good at it. And so we traveled across the country with the vice presidential candidate, set things up, and it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun doing that. Knew I did not want to do that for a job because that is also a job. But I had my experience as a press secretary. I had my experience in the internet world, and I just wanted to keep doing that. I liked internet communications, and so when during the recount or during the 40 days that it was being figured out in Florida, the hanging chads, and I had worked on the campaign. And so I was talking again to Jack, and Jack was just great because he was a veteran of the Washington political scene. He said, "This is what you do." He said, "If you want to work for the White House." And I said, "Absolutely." Because the thought was that President Bush did win the election, and it would be, and it would turn out that way. And so there was a transition office that was being set up in McLean, Virginia. And so Jack said, "Be the first one to show up. Just show up and act like you're supposed to be there." Okay, Jack. So I did that. I was the first one to show up. I don't know if I was the first one, but I was very early at 5 a.m. in the McLean, Virginia office. And then Jack said, and you just find a job and you claim it. And I said, but I don't have a job, Jack. I was working volunteer. Jack said, who cares? You just claim a job. So I go in and I don't know. I knew a few people from the campaign, but basically I'm just there. I'm trying to figure out what job do I claim, right? And what I noticed in the first couple days was everybody was, I mean, the smartphone revolution had not happened yet, Wendy, and so landlines were still really, really important, and everybody were setting up their offices and the whole thing, and nobody knew where the phones were. And everybody said, "Well, I need a phone. I need a phone." And so I found the guy who the AT&T guy who was doing the phones, but he didn't know what he was doing. He had no direction. It was chaos in the transition office. So I decided I'm going to be the campaign liaison to the phone guy. And so I just buddied up with the AT&T guy and I just started owning it. And so I would go in the office, okay, you need a phone? Yeah, I'm the phone guy. I'll take care of it for you. That's how I met everyone. And so the people in charge of the campaign office thought I was like the phone guy with AT&T. Nope. I'm the phone guy with the campaign. And as I got to know people, they knew me as a phone guy, and I set up their phones and the whole thing. They got to know me, and so uh, the head of the office says, "So you're with AT&T, right?" And I said, "No, I'm with the campaign. I was with the vice presidential campaign, and I'm the phone guy here." And I go, "Oh, we don't have you on the list." And he goes, "We need to get you on the list as part of the campaign staff." And I said, "Yeah, you do, because this is what I do. I've been." And so that's how I got on, and I was listed with the campaign staff. I just created a job for myself. I did exactly what Jack told me to do. Find a job and just own it. And I got it. So I got on the campaign staff, got to know people, was employed by the campaign staff. Jack is happy because he's because I'm no longer his lobbyist. And so that's how I started, and that's how I got to know people. That's how I got to know Ari Fleischer. Is And so I started talking to different people, and a mutual friend, well, this guy that the press secretary for the governor of South Carolina, who I was a friend with, called me and said, "You know who they're looking for? They're looking for an internet guy. They're looking for somebody with digital communications." And back in 2000, there weren't a lot of people that had internet communications background and a press secretary, and that's what they were looking for. So I applied for the job, and because I was known, I'll go, "Yeah, we know this guy. He's a phone guy." Well, actually, look at his background. So um, I was offered a job at the Department of Interior as part of the parachute team because of my background with Jim Geringer. And so I went to work for the Department of Interior for 3 days as a director of communications as part of the parachute team, just because of my background. But I wanted the job at the White House. And so I had applied, did the interview and the whole thing. And Tucker Eskew, who was the head of the Office of Media Affairs, called me at the Department of Interior on day 3 of the administration and said, "How'd you like a job at the White House?" And so I took it. It was a massive pay cut, massive. I did not care, and was hired on as a spokesman for the. Uh, I was a spokesman for the White House for all the internet media companies. CNN.com. It was different back then, and then I would run the web page and all the internet stuff at the White House. That's how I got in, and
Wow.
yeah, it was an absolute thrill to be able to go to work at the White House, and it was a great experience.
And of course, you were there during 9/11, and we've been able to tell your story, the story that you wrote, and put that on Cowboy State Daily when we have the anniversary of the terrorist attacks, and I know that that was something that has impacted you heavily going forward. And tell us just a little bit about how did your life change? How did your outlook change after being in the White House on the day of the terror attacks?
Yeah, one of the things that Andy Card, who was the chief of staff for the White House, came and spoke to all the different offices and said, relish every day in the White House, be thankful every day because it goes really fast, and just be grateful every day. And so I took that to heart. And one of the things you can do as a White House staffer is you can give private White House tours of the Oval Office. And what Andy Card said, when anybody asks you to give a tour, give a tour. He said, because you're giving them a gift they will never forget. And I thought that was great. And so when anyone from Wyoming uh, called to say, "Hey, can you give me a tour?" Because people find out about this stuff. I never turned anyone down. I gave so many people tours after hours. You have to sign up for them because I became an expert tour guide of the West Wing. I mean, it was in the Oval Office. It was a wonderful thing, and I loved doing it. And that was I just listened to what Andy Card said and did exactly what he said. And when 9/11 happened, we were in this meeting and or I actually I saw we had just walked back from Starbucks. We had a 8 o'clock meeting, a communications meeting. We went to Starbucks, walked back, and we saw this plane. It was on NBC News, and they thought at the time we were watching Matt Lauer and Katie Couric. They thought it was a Cessna, and so we're watching this, and they thought it was just a little plane. And then I saw that second plane uh, hit hit the trade center, and I went into Tucker's office. He was on the phone, and I said, "Tucker, a second plane hit the World Trade Center," and he said, "Nah, you saw a replay." And I said, "No, I saw a second plane," and he goes, "No, I'm on the phone. You saw a replay." So I'm walking back, and I'm going, "Well, maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe I didn't see that." Then he came back in the office and he said, uh, "You were right. Gather up the team. We need to have an emergency meeting." And so uh, we started talking about what was happening, and then the alarms went off, and the Secret Service was bashing on the doors, telling us to exit the White House. Uh, and so, we're running, all of us are running out to the north lawn, and the Secret Service agents are telling us a plane was headed for the White House. So it was unbelievable. And then we were out in Lafayette Park for a couple hours before we huddled in another location. And then when I got home that evening, late that evening, I lived a quarter mile from the Pentagon, and my apartment building was full of smoke, and it was an unbelievable day. Everybody has their own memories of 9/11, and that was mine. But what happened then is we thought of the website differently. We thought of it as a very important way to communicate with the public now that uh, the internet was becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that was my focus of the job. I was a spokesman, but my real focus, what I really like to do, is use the power of the internet. And so what had happened, Wendy, is Tucker Eskew was put on assignment to go overseas and work in the prime minister's office. And so Nicole Devonish, now Nicole Wallace, and you see her on MSNBC, she took over as a director of communications or the head of the Office of Media Affairs. And that's when my life really changed, because Tucker was very much in control. He was very kind of strict, and we will use this for official purposes only. And he was just very cut and dry, which is fine. Great. He's a great guy, and that's who he is. Nicole, on the other hand, was much more laissez faire and much more fun. And she just said, to me, "Jimmy, have fun. Do what you want." And so she really gave me the keys to have fun on the White House website. And the way that I saw it was Nobody is going to go to a website that just has policy positions because that's boring. You got to make it interesting. And that's a word that comes out of my mouth, as you know, all the time.
How many times a day? Yes.
Yeah, right? And so White House tours were canceled in 2002 still because of 9/11. They had been canceled for more than a year. And these are the public tours. And so we had thought, why don't we bring the White House tours to the public, the Christmas tours to the public? How do we do that and make it fun? Well, we put a video camera on the president's dog's head, right? President's dog was named Barney. You remember Barney. And so I took that idea to the White House communications meeting at 8:30 in the morning. And so I pitched it. And I pitched the idea of Barney Cam to the office. Everybody gets a chance to talk, right? And so I pitched that idea of Barney Cam. Well, why don't we put a video camera on the dog's head, and I pitched the idea, and there's like 30 people in the meeting, and it went completely quiet. Everybody's looking at me like I had just grown another head. I mean, it was the most uncomfortable silence ever. And then Ari Fleischer said, after 5 seconds, Ari Fleischer said, "That is awesome." And then everybody was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's great." Ari saved it. Ari opened the door for it. So we filmed Barney Cam, which was just Barney running through the White House and looking at all the decorations, and it broke the White House servers. We had it was the top news. You know, they debuted it on uh, Mrs. Bush debuted Barney Cam at the children's, where she, instead of reading a book to the children's hospital, she debuted Barney Cam, and it was on NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN. They all broadcast it live, right?
You went viral for Barney Cam.
Before you could go viral. And I can remember, because it was dumb. It was just Barney walking through the house and the whole thing. And Wolf Blitzer said on CNN, "I can't believe we're airing this." And I'm nodding in agreement. I can't believe it either. It was huge. But so it was just a lot. You know, I had more fun at the White House. After I left, I was there for 4 years. They really cracked down, and there are no fun things on the White House website anymore. But for 4 years, 3 years, I mean, it was really fun. It was wacky. I remember the woman I was dating at the time said, "You're treating the White House website like it's your personal playground." And I was. They let me do anything, Wendy. It was fantastic. One quick thing.
That's
So when we
yes,
did
yes.
Barney Cam 2, Barney Reloaded, the director of communications for the White House at that time was named Dan Bartlett. Dan came to me and he said, "Listen, we got the Iraq War going on. I know you want the president to be a part of Barney Cam 2, but he's not going to do it. I'm not asking him." So it snowed 2 weeks before Christmas. It snowed on a Friday night. I get a call in the morning from the president's personal secretary, and she said, the White House operator called, and she said, "Mr. Orr, Ashley Estes on the phone for you." I pick up the phone. I go, "Ashley, what I do wrong?" Because I'm thinking I am in trouble. And she said, "Nothing. The president wants to do Barney Cam." And I'm going, "Holy cow." So I drive in, and we filmed Barney Cam 2, Barney Reloaded, which was a surreal experience. It was unbelievable, um, because the president's talking to me. I'm briefing the president, and he said, "Okay, what are we doing here?" And I said, "Mr. President, here's your motivation. Barney doesn't. Barney's in charge of putting up the decorations, but he doesn't want to. So you got to tell him to get to work." And he goes, "I can do that. I can do that." And I've got it all on tape. It's crazy. So after we get done, I call Dan Bartlett up, and I go, "Dan, we just got done filming Barney Cam 2 with the president, but I didn't call him. The president called me." And so that was we really had fun at the White House during that time. And so
I have to ask, can we get Barney Cam on YouTube? Did somebody upload it to YouTube? Can we
Oh,
find it?
yeah. Yeah, I've
Okay.
got it.
Well,
Yeah.
I need to link that to the show notes here, folks, because we all have to be able to watch Barney Cam. So, Jimmy, we're just having I mean, your stories are phenomenal, but we're gonna run out of time before we get to some of these other really important things, which is number one, how'd you get to the LA Times? Because that's a big deal. And number two, how do we now have Cowboy State Daily? And so I'll let you pick how you want to tell those
Yeah, so
stories.
I went to work for Arnold Schwarzenegger right after the White House. I was asked to do the same thing, and so we had fun out at Arnold Schwarzenegger's place. That was a great experience. But I wanted to get back into journalism because that was my background. I had a friend who was the editor of the Christian Science Monitor in Boston. He asked me if I would come out there and help them transform their operation into a digital only or a digital first operation. So that was my job for 3 years, turning this very well respected uh, um, journal journalistic enterprise into a digital first. And so I worked with John Yema, the former managing editor of the Boston Globe, to do that. We did that together, and it was just great. It was a wonderful experience working with John and everybody there. And there were articles written about what the Christian Science Monitor was doing digitally. It caught the eye of the editor of the Los Angeles Times, Russ Stanton, who reached out to me via a mutual friend and said, "Hey, could you do the same for us at the LA Times?" And so I went out to the Los Angeles Times, and the way it's structured is the editor is here, and then there are two managing editors. I was a managing editor for digital, and Mark Duvason was the managing editor for print. And so we did our thing and was able to really uh, help the LA Times move into a more digital first platform. And they really were. They were, the LA Times, I think, was leading the way in how we covered real time news. It was a great operation, really good people. Um, and I just think we did we were, the whole switch, Wendy, is difficult when you go from a print mindset to a digital mindset, because when something happens you have to write about it then. You can't wait for a 5:30 deadline or an 8 p.m. deadline. You have to go now. And so what we did is we really focused on blogs at the time, which were just really like real-time reporting. And then we got into video and how are we going to present our video product? And that's how I met Mitch Semmel, who former executive producer, Letterman, Conan. He was the CBS, CNN. He was the general manager of The Onion back when it was funny. He started HuffPost Live, but we really advanced our video product with Mitch. And then, of course, we brought Mitch in here at Cowboy State Daily
What a
to
gift he's been, yeah.
launch your podcast, The Roundup, to launch our video news broadcast every morning, and then, of course, Jake's radio show. What's funny about Mitch was he was the one that took Howard Stern from a radio show to a video show. He directed that. Mitch directed that. And so Mitch did the same for us. I mean, to be able to have the resources of a Mitch Semmel at Cowboy State Daily has been unbelievable.
And again, just like conversations with you, with others, to find out these backstories, I had no idea until I interviewed Mitch how really important his role was in digital media and in visual media. And so that has just been a gift to us here at Cowboy State Daily. I
Yeah,
still have to
there's
stop and
no
think, how did we get here?
there's no one better than Mitch. There's no one better than Mitch, and the fact that we were able to get him here. He's a good guy, great guy. Looks like Seinfeld, um, and we're going to be partnering with him in the future too. So with other
You've just
things.
got all these amazing contacts, but these amazing contacts that have come about because of all of your contacts, Jimmy. Let's because we only have a few minutes left, Jimmy, let's transition to how do you take all of this experience that you have had in the political world, in the digital world, in the broadcast and journalism world, how do you get that and say, I want to launch from scratch a platform, a news platform that's never been done before.
Well, so
And tell us about that.
Annalise Wiedersmann, long time. I've known Annalise forever, and Annalise is the daughter of Cynthia Lummis. Annalise, in 2018, asked me if I missed. Oh, I had moved out here to launch a digital sports show with Woody Page of ESPN's Round the Horn and Les Shapiro of Channel 4 in Denver. But like any digital enterprise, sometimes they work, sometimes they didn't work. This one didn't work. It lasted for about a year. It was fun. So Annalise asked me how much I missed the LA Times, and I missed it a lot because it was such a great job and working with great people, and I risked that great job to launch this digital startup in Denver. It didn't work, and so I told her I really missed journalism. And so in 2019, she came back to me and she said, "Well, what if you and I start uh, a Wyoming-based news operation together?" And I said, if you can find the funding. She was able to find the funding, the startup money through Foster Freeze, um, the former gubernatorial candidate, and of course his background in finance, the late Foster Freeze, and so uh, she was able to find startup money. And she said, "All right, so we've got this. What do we do first?" And I said, "Well, we've got to bring on Jim Angel, who was a former Wyoming Associated Press bureau chief and the head of the Wyoming Press Association." I said, "We need to do that for two reasons. One, because there's nobody better, and two, it's instant credibility." So we talked to Jim, and Jim said that we were at Starbucks, and Jim said, "I just retired from the Wyoming Press Association." And so, like the Godfather, we brought him back in, and he said, "But we need editorial freedom." And so that meant that Foster Freeze, if he were to give us a startup money, no strings attached, he couldn't say, "You write about this or you write about this," or anything like that. We were able to get that. We were able to get that in writing. We had complete editorial freedom. So Jim Angel, Annalise Wiedersmann, and I, and then we tapped in with Bob Jiha, longtime TV reporter, Mike McCrimmon, longtime videographer. We started this business together. It's far different, not even close to what it is right now. 6 months later, you joined us, Bill Sniffen joined us, and we did this thing for, and it was uh, it was a month to month endeavor. We all had different jobs. We were just doing this for the love of journalism, and but it was nothing like it is today. And then Wayne Hughes spotted Cowboy State Daily, and he thought there was promise to it, but he knew that the way we were operating wasn't sustainable. We had to totally change everything. And so we went in our third incarnation of Cowboy State Daily, which is when he took over, and that's when we turned into a real news organization with real journalists, and we turned into what we do today. And what we do today, Wendy, when you look at the team that we have, it's unbelievable.
I have to when I'm reading the stories every day, I'm thinking, how is it that we have such talent and such dedication and such just really impressive journalists, not just writers, but journalists that tell stories that are engaging and journalists that are willing to call up the victim of a crime and say, "Can you tell me your story?" And the victims say, "Okay." I mean, how is it that we're able to get those kinds of it's Wyoming and tapping into that talent pool. You've been able to put that together.
Yeah, well, we've got really good people and we've got really good journalists, and they're not activists, they're journalists. They don't tell you how you should think. They report this is what happened, and that's really important for us. Wayne has said from the very beginning we don't put our thumb on the scale, and we don't. What we do is we tell the stories, and so we have a team of very experienced journalists, not activists, who who tell the day's stories. And our turnover rate's been very, very low. We've been able to keep people for a long time. You know, we're coming up on our third year under the latest version of Cowboy State Daily. Greg Johnson is our managing editor, and Greg is a workhorse, a tireless workhorse. He's unbelievable, the amount of time and dedication that he puts into this. So, you know, his day ends about 8 p.m., and then he's on with Jake on our morning show at 6:10 every morning. The hours that he puts in as a managing editor, and then of course he edits the stories that we have over the weekend. So it starts with Greg, and then when you have, you know, Leo Wolfson was our first hire in the new Cowboy State Daily as our political reporter. And so he's been covering politics almost for 3 years solid for us right now. And then who was right after
Was
right
it
after
Claire right after Leo?
yeah, it was Claire. Uh, you know, Cale Case, the senator from Lander, told us about Claire probably 4 years ago. He said, "You got to pick up Claire McFarland. She is the best." And but Claire was very happy at the Riverton Ranger until there was a change in ownership, and then so we were able to lure her over. And Claire's been she's crime in courts, but also an outstanding features writer as well. She also has a mommy column, which is very popular.
I don't know
And
how
then
she fits everything into her day because she's got these kids. It's like, oh my
got four
gosh.
kids too.
Yeah.
And then Mark Hines, who's our outdoors reporter, who is such a good writer, but also a really good reporter. He's been around for a long time. You worked with him up in Cody.
Yes. Mhm.
Renee
And Leo
Jean,
as well. Yeah.
Renee Jean, who is our business and tourism reporter, long time, a veteran reporter. Again, we're talking about Wendy, people that have 10, 20, 30 years of journalism experience. So real pros who again are journalists. Here's what happened. And uh, so let's see. And then we have a great freelance staff as well
Mhm.
on a, you know, of people that are with us, and so we just have a really good solid um, team of people. I'm just uh, and you know, Jackie Dorothy just joined us. She's fantastic. Everybody talked to us about Jackie. Andrew Rossi, who you worked with, Andrew Rossi's on our team. It's
We've
just
got Dale Killingbeck. We've got, I mean, the people that we have been able to gather into our fold. We've got a new editor now as well that added to the editorial staff with Justin George.
you know, Justin George, who comes from the Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun and the Tampa Bay Tribune. And his focus is on quality and on story development and reporter development. We got Dale from Grand Rapids. You know, he's been in the business for over 30 years, and so it's just this mix of really good reporters. And you know, as you know, Wendy, we meet every morning at 8:30. That's when we have the budget meeting. Jake Nichols, we started that radio show with him about a month and a half ago.
Which is, on one hand, awesome, and on the other hand, we lost his really amazing journalistic style with the features that he did.
Right. But he promises us he's going to be able to go back and write some stories for us once we're comfortable with the radio product. And so Jake's on every morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And the thought is we're going to make it available to syndicate. So if any radio station in Wyoming wants to pick it up, it's 100% radio or Wyoming focus. That's what our focus is. It's on Wyoming. And so we'll be able to offer that. And yeah, so you know, we branched off in a lot of areas. We're doing a lot of video. We just picked up Riley Strand, your
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Saved my life by hiring Riley.
Yeah, he helps you out with the video, and he's a great videographer, and he's a great editor too. And so we've got this team. And then Wendy, you got to talk about the columnists.
Oh
So
my
let's
goodness.
go through these.
Yes.
All right. So we got Bill Sniffen, who's been in Wyoming journalism for 50 years. 50, more than 50. We've got Joanne Barron, who has covered Wyoming since 1970, right? And we've got Rod Miller. Rod Miller, who has been a prolific writer for decades and a very well-read columnist and not afraid to mix things up. And and then we've got Dave
We've
Simpson.
got
Dave
Cassie
Simpson.
Craven, Dave
Well,
Simpson.
hold
Yeah,
it.
who else?
Yeah, let's go Dave Simpson. Dave Simpson was the state editor for the Casper Star for years. And so he's been in journalism for 40 plus years. So he's on Monday. And on Tuesday is Candy Moulton. Candy Moulton wrote for the Casper Star for 25 years, an author and a writer. And she also edits a section of our site called The American West. Wednesday is Tom Lubnow. Tom Lubnow, the former Speaker of the House in the Wyoming State Legislature, an attorney. We have Sally Ann Shermer. Sally Ann Shermer worked for the Casper Star for 35 years as a writer and a columnist, and she writes for us a lot of University of Wyoming stuff. She's diehard. You know, her dad was a coach um, in college football and in the NFL, and she knows football like nobody else. We've got Jonathan Lang and Dennis Sun on Saturdays. On Sundays, we've got Bill, Joanne, Rod, and Cassie. So our columnist stable is just unbelievable. The experience, the direct Wyoming experience that they have, it's just incredible.
And the varied viewpoints and the varied topics and, everything from Claire's column about being a mom to Sally Ann to we've got a lot of politics, but we have just Wyoming observations and life observations. And I think that there's something so interesting about that. We even have, and that's one of the things that I love about Cowboy State Daily is we are truly Wyoming's newspaper. We have everything, including the funnies. Because with our newsletter, when you're a newsletter subscriber, you've got the Daily Darwin. You've got and Jimmy, you curate those. This is
Yeah,
something
and
that
all
you
right,
do
so
for Cowboy
I'm
State
glad you
Daily.
bring that up. So we've got the newsletter, 83,000 subscribers. And and the newsletter is actually what attracted Wayne to Cowboy State Daily in the first place. And so it's we view the newsletter as the morning newspaper, and we treat it as such. And so that's where we have Dawn Day, we have the Wyoming Sunrise, we have your video newscast. We've got a link to um, Jake's morning radio show. Then what we pledge is to have at least 10 original stories per day, at least, on Cowboy State Daily. And sometimes it's 14, sometimes it's 15. Occasionally, if we're short staffed because of something, we'll have 9, but we'll always shoot for 10. And it's all original content. We don't use wire copy. We don't use copy from anybody else. It's all original Cowboy State Daily. That is our pledge. And it's important that we do that. Everything we write. And then we have our columnists, and then we have the Farm Ag Report. We have cartoons and opinion, and it's important that our cartoons are slanted, but that's opinion, and in opinion you can have that. In opinion, uh, uh, that's what we do. Some people complain about the cartoons; they always have. Then there's a comic section, what we think of as a comic section, and that's the wacky videos that we have. The funny videos or whatever. The reason we do that is that's our version of of comics. And so we present that every single morning. And so when people ask about that, we say, well, your regular newspaper has that too, and that's what we do. And so anyway, that's we have a few products. We have our website, we have our newsletter, which is the most powerful medium, 83,000 subscribers. We're on social media at about 152,000 followers on Facebook right now. What else do we have? We have our radio show. We have our news show. We're on
We're on
YouTube.
radio stations. We've got our news on radio stations across the state. So that's been really fun to have those relationships,
Right.
to create those relationships.
Your newscast is on about 30 radio stations. And
Mhm.
I think we just signed someone else up, right?
We did. Yep, we've got the brand new Pinedale station. So
Mhm.
we're glad to have Blake Coble on board now with the rest of them. Jimmy, we've got so much going on here, but there's always something new in the works. And so we are way over time, so we're gonna make this short and sweet. What do you see next for Cowboy State Daily?
Well, um, we're gonna continue to. What's really important is you know is is to think about where our readers are and what they want to read. We want to, what makes us different than some news organizations is we don't have an official opinion of the newspaper. We don't write an editorial. It's not our position to tell you how to think. And I think that's where newspapers and news organizations get into trouble because Michael Jordan is famous for saying Republicans buy sneakers too. And what he meant by that is the reason he didn't get involved in social causes and political causes is he knew he would alienate half of his fans. He was really smart. Clay Travis went on to write a book called Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, which is a criticism of athletes getting involved in political causes. And if we were to have an official opinion of the newspaper, then uh, then that would cloud people's thinkings about our journalism. Wayne has said from the very beginning he would get involved in Cowboy State Daily, but one of his rules is we don't put our thumb on the scale. We're straight up. This is what happened, and we strive very hard to just report it straight down the middle. And we're not perfect, but nobody is. But we try very hard for that. And so we don't have a position from the newspaper. We don't have an editorial. I think that's where a lot of newspapers really get into trouble. There's a local newspaper here in Cheyenne that would constantly opine and tell you how to think, and their circulation plummeted, absolutely plummeted, because you know what? People don't want to be told this is how you should think. We do have an opinion section. That's fine. Um, but those are columnists. We don't have one. And so there are no changes there. We don't have a position as a newspaper. We're just going to be straight up. This is what the news is, and we will expand into other areas. We will fill our energy position. That's the most immediate thing. But the thing is, Renee Jean is so talented. Not only is she a scientist and a reporter, but she's got an energy background. So she is filling that role and business and tourism. But it's just to find the other spots, the other holes in the state where we need to report on, and we'll do that. And so, there a couple other people, Wendy, that we need to mention before this is done. We need to mention Todd Titus. Todd is our head of advertising, who's done such a wonderful job, and really, he. We know this because we did a nationwide search for a head of advertising, and they said the best person is in your backyard. And Todd was working in Casper, and he's been unbelievable. But another person is Brad Erickson. Brad Erickson keeps us afloat. Our traffic is through the roof, and we get these spikes that are monstrous. And he keeps our site up, and he is tireless. He is our tech guy, and he's the best there is. Abby Roach helps out Todd, and
She knows everybody in the state, I swear.
She knows everybody in the state, and she is great on Jake's show. And so it's just a really, we have an unbelievable staff and a great team. And I think people see that, in our 8:30 meeting, which is a lot of fun. And so we're just really blessed to have the people that we're having. And the common goal is we all love Wyoming. And as Bill Sniffen used to say, and I like this: do we have a bias? Yes, we do, and that is we are pro Wyoming. And there are other news organizations that always point out, well, Wyoming is, that I won't get into it, but we're pro Wyoming. We love Wyoming. We're a glass half full, and we're really grateful to be in this wonderful state. And I know you feel that way, and as a native, I feel that way. So anyway, that's what we're here doing. Is we're all grateful to be on board as Cowboy State Daily. We love it.
Jimmy, this has been such an awesome conversation. The time has flown by, and I'm just sorry that we have to cut off because I know you've got so many more stories and so many more people that have been in your
I'm too
orbit over the
long-winded.
years.
I know that.
That's all right, that's all right. But I do wanna say thank you, Jimmy, for the vision that you had with Annalise and being able to direct us to where we are today, and we've just got so many years ahead of us bringing the great stories and really showcasing the best of Wyoming in all its aspects. So, thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, folks, for tuning into the Roundup today. Thank you for all of your support. If you have enjoyed this, please let us know. If you got ideas for other people who aren't as long-winded as Jimmy, let me know so that
Yeah.
we can go ahead and get them on and tell their story as well. Don't forget the Wyoming Business Alliance Business from the Basement podcast. Check them out if you're a Wyoming business person. They've got lots of great resources for you there. Jimmy, thank you for affording me the opportunity to do the things that I do and to meet the people that I have in this job. This has just been a gift, and I'm grateful. And thanks for bringing this to Wyoming.
Well, and thanks to you, Wendy, for everything that you do. And the big thanks goes to Wayne for making this all happen.
Amen. Thank you. Thanks, folks, for tuning in. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week.